All right, let's be honest. Nobody ever really saw Janet Kramer in those shadowy corners of Hangar 7 out at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. You'd think after 20 years off active duty, a 62-year-old woman with silver hair pulled back, so tight it looked like a helmet would fade into the background. And in some ways, she did, her coveralls oil-stained, name tag just a faded J. Kramer, technician, retired. To the young guys, she was just Granny Wrench, another stubborn old-timer who didn't know when to quit. But, sometimes the shadows hide legends, and Janet Kramer was one. Now, on that morning, the guys were having a field day as she started working on the A-10, tail number 810965, set to be scrapped at the boneyard. Rodriguez, 22, full of himself, leaning against the toolbox, goes, "Hey, Granny, finally putting this bucket out of its misery?" His buddy Brooks jumps in, probably take her all week to figure out which bolt's which. And Janet, well, she just wiped down the cockpit like she was saying goodbye to an old friend, didn't even blink at the jokes. Because respect, she knew, wasn't handed out, it was earned, and sometimes you had to fight for it. See, none of these airmen had any idea that Janet Kramer had been Lightning, the most feared close air support pilot across 3 wars. 61 combat missions, 1 distinguished flying cross, 1,000 stories and every scratch and rivet on that old warthog. She'd landed a bird on one wheel and a prayer, pulled 9 Marines out of an ambush with 17 holes in her fuselage. But those medals sat rusting on her dresser, and memories, well, they didn't pay the rent. So she came back to the only life she'd ever known, wrenching on the very planes she once flew, a ghost among the living. It's funny, how the young guys see old age as a kind of disease, something that steals your relevance. Brooks, again, make sure you disconnect the hydraulics, Granny, we don't want fluid everywhere. She just nodded, as if she hadn't been fixing those very systems when Brooks was still learning his times tables. All morning, every task brought a new dig about her age or her pace. Rodriguez asked, "You ever actually been in one of these, Granny? Or you just play pilot?" Janet looked him dead in the eye. "Just for a moment, once or twice," she said. That quiet? It cut deeper than any joke. But the disrespect wasn't just from the kids. Master Sergeant Williams, her supervisor, rode her harder than anyone. "Kramer, you're moving too slow. This bird's due for processing by Friday." She tried to stand her ground. Proper maintenance takes time. But he cut her off. "Turn wrenches. Don't give speeches." Other contractors watched, knowing full well how good she was, but afraid to stick their necks out. Retired men irrelevant, and nobody wanted to catch that. Still, she moved through her day with almost painful precision, cataloging parts, checking systems, running her hands over the skin of the A-10, feeling every story in the metal. That plane had been her life, her friend, her foxhole, her escape. And now she was tearing it apart bolt by bolt, every turn feeling like a betrayal. When the hangar cleared out that night, Janet wandered back to the pilot equipment room, her flight suit still hanging there, the old patches and wings staring back at her. Locking up, she took one last look at her A-10, the desert wind whistling through the doors, thinking about all the times she'd heard, "Lightning, we need you now." In her dreams, she was still that pilot, still answering the call. But the next day? The next day brought worse. Word had gotten around about the old lady on the A-10, and suddenly everyone had a joke. Rodriguez started timing her with his phone, 47 minutes for one panel. And officers got in on it, too. Even the hangar supervisor, Williams, turned it up a notch. "Make it perfect, Kramer. This one's for the museum." That stung the most, seeing a bird that had saved real lives reduced to a display with a plaque. Even her lunch breaks weren't safe. The young airman joked about getting her a pillow, wondering if she believed her own stories. Only Technical Sergeant Lisa Park, one of the few women in the hangar, showed any decency, apologizing for the boys. "Where'd you learn all this?" she asked. Janet just smiled. "You pick things up." But things escalated. Colonel Bradley showed up for inspection, and Rodriguez went straight into performance mode. "We're making great progress, sir." "She's real thorough." Bradley eyed Janet, asked about her experience. She hesitated, not wanting to open the can of worms. "Most of my career, sir." Rodriguez couldn't resist. "She's got stories, sir, more than the pilots." After Bradley left, Rodriguez was grinning. Even the brass thinks you're full of it, Granny. Janet's hands just moved slower, jaw a little tighter. That evening, alone, she leafed through the maintenance logbook, her own name filling page after page, every pre-flight, every damage report, every mission. Once she'd been both pilot and crew chief. Now, she was a ghost in her own house. By day 3, Rodriguez came armed with new ammunition. No record of any female A-10 pilots named Kramer anywhere, Granny. He was too young to know he was poking at something deep, too arrogant to see the warning signs. Even Brooks chimed in, real pilots don't brag. Janet looked him dead in the eye. Your granddad was right. And then came Williams. Again, change of plans, Kramer. Strip this bird by tomorrow, or we'll find someone who can. She stood her ground. Rushing this risks damaging parts. But Williams just smiled, enjoying the power. The threat was clear. Mess up, and you're gone. By then, the sabotage had started, tools missing, bolts loosened, specs altered. Janet reported it, but Williams barely looked up. Maybe you're just forgetful, Kramer. She knew better. Somebody wanted her gone. At lunch, she overheard Rodriguez bragging to visitors. Got this old lady thinks she's some hero, claims she flew at 10s. We have fun with her. One visiting master sergeant frowned, asked her name. When he heard lightning, his face changed. He knew. That afternoon, the humiliation peaked. Williams assigned Rodriguez to supervise her, just an excuse for more nitpicking. Then Rodriguez knocked her tools to the floor. Oops, Granny, better clean that up. Janet knelt, gathering the pieces, but something inside her snapped. She looked up at Rodriguez, her eyes cold steel, and for a second, even he flinched. That night, Janet made a choice. She pulled out her old flight suit, dusted off the patches, and remembered who she was. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Colonel Mike Stevens. An old friend, voice urgent, FOB Viper under attack. 43 Americans pinned down, no air support. Janet was out the door in minutes. At the base, chaos reigned. Only a handful of A-10s were flyable. No pilots qualified for close air support. Janet checked the birds. Her old Warthog was the only one she trusted. Give me 4 hours, she said. When the room fell silent and everyone stared, she didn't blink. There is one pilot. Me. Major Woods, the current squadron commander, looked skeptical. Janet rattled off her credentials, commercial license, recent test flights, still current. The room shifted, mockery died, replaced by awe. Rodriguez, stunned, you're talking about combat, ma'am. She just looked at him. Son, I've been doing this since before you were born. Suddenly, everyone snapped to park, gathered the best crew. Maintenance went into overdrive. Even Williams tried to apologize, but Janet stopped him. Respect isn't about rank, Sergeant. When the general arrived, she didn't ask for permission, she demanded it, and got it. The whole base watched as Janet suited up, climbed into her Warthog, the cheers from her old tormentors echoing through the hangar. Eye in the air. It was all instinct. Janet zeroed in on FOB Viper, red smoke, tracer fire, tanks moving in. First pass, she vaporized a machine gun nest. The GU-8 cannon thundering, ground troops cheering, lightning's here. She took out 2 tanks, forced the third to run. Running low on fuel, she stayed, covering the medevac with her last rounds. Engines flaming out on final, she dead-sticked the landing cool as ice. When the canopy opened, the same airman who called her Granny Wrench lost it, cheering. Rodriguez sobbed, I'm sorry, ma'am. I had no idea. She looked at him. Now you know. What will you do with it? Lightning's story went viral. Media, Pentagon, soldiers she'd saved. The bird wasn't scrapped. It became Lightning 01, a heritage aircraft. Rodriguez changed. Park was promoted. Williams got reassigned, and the whole hangar transformed. They learned to look past gray hair and calloused hands, to see the warrior within 0.6 months later. Lightning 01 was still flying, Janet mentoring a new generation, her story changing how veterans were treated everywhere. That nose art under the cockpit? Experience never expires. If you think courage fades with age, think again. Now, let's talk. What would you have done in Janet's shoes? Does experience still have a place in a world obsessed with youth? Drop your thoughts below, because stories like this only matter if we learn from them.